My name is Aditya, and I work at Frappe Technologies. And for past 2.5 years, I've been working on a small project uh, that, have, that has grown to essentially encompass all of our infrastructure. And then that product is very imaginatively named Frappe Cloud. Uh, and it's just not me. There's like a big team of highly talented engineers working with me, and I think some of them are here, including our co-founder who has left to start another product inside Frappe. I hope Faris is here, and the rest of the people can't join because they think I'm too preachy. So anyway, you guys are my guinea pigs. So the question that I keep getting from people who are not aware about Frappe and ERP Next is, what is Frappe Cloud? And this is the marketing answer, which is, it's our managed hosting platform. But the short answer is, this is the platform that essentially allows us to host all of our internal apps and all of our customer-facing apps and all of the apps of our customers. And everything that you'll possibly hear from Frappe ever about will be hosted on Frappe Cloud, including the IndiaFOSS website and the FOSS United website. So, and in last 2.5 years, it has grown from almost 0 users, 0 sites, to a moderately sized cluster of about 100 servers. This includes bare metals and VMs. And roughly, we are doing 250 million requests every single month. And sites is basically our parlance for database schemas. This is individual. So IndiaFOSS, for instance, is one of the sites that is running on Frappe Cloud. And we'll get to what apps and benches are. But we are seeing some widespread traction over this platform. So before we go into how we do what we do and why I'm here, I have to tell you about Bench, because, well, none of you know about Bench. So this is our unit of deployment, which is when you download Frappe framework on your server or ERP Next on your server, this is what you get. You get Nginx as reverse proxy. You get MariaDB as a database server. And you get something called Bench. So Bench basically has 2 components. One is called apps, and the other is sites. So sites is the framework's way of doing multi-tenancy. So Frappe framework can do multi-tenancy from the get-go without you having to configure anything. And basically, every site has a URL associated with it, something like IndiaFOSS.net or FOSSUnited.org. And every site has a database schema associated with it. So you don't have to provision a different MariaDB server just for running 2 sites. And then apps are our way of saying, basically, an app is Python and JavaScript source code that allows you to extend the existing models and define your own models and controllers. In Frappe framework parlance, we call it a doc type. So, and you can also define your own custom pages, the way the current FOSS United team is doing with the IndiaFOSS website. And when you deploy Frappe framework on your server, you get a CLI tool which is also named Bench that lets you run arbitrary commands that lets you create more sites or drop sites or modify your existing sites or your apps. And for most of the deployments, this is where it ends. And everyone is happy. But we wanted to go a little bit further and allow some special cases where, what if the apps that you want to deploy are essentially conflicting between sites? So you want to deploy ERP Next version 13 on one site and version 12 on another site. So what we do is essentially on one server, we run multiple benches. And each bench has its own set of apps and own set of sites, which then don't conflict with each other. And the way Bench itself is architected, it doesn't basically it doesn't conflict with other benches on the same server. And this is also good enough for some other setup deployments, but we decided to go further because at some point, you can't just keep adding more and more sites on your database, because you're going to hit some limits, either compute or size limits. So what you do is you can provision another server for another set of your sites. And that is what we've been doing with Frappe Cloud. Every time new setup customers come to us, we just provision a whole new server like this, and then we allocate those tenants on the new server. And this is where essentially Frappe Cloud comes in. So it has two components. One is called press, and the other is called agent. The nomenclature for press is kind of stupid because, anyway, let it go. So agent is essentially what allows us to run predefined commands on our servers. So before this, we were using Ansible. And the way Ansible does this is you write some Python code, and you SSH into a remote machine. And then you copy your Python code onto your remote machine, and then execute it. The way we do it with the agent is simply the app is already installed, and certain endpoints are exposed. And we just call those endpoints over and over again without having to ship your code back and forth. And press, so I'll go into both of these components. But right now, we are running such 100 servers on Frappe Cloud. So press is, again, just another Frappe app. Everything that we do at Frappe are basically just Frappe apps. It makes everything extremely easy because they share the same architecture, and then you can deploy everything on Frappe Cloud. Currently, I think the only thing that is not deployed on Frappe Cloud is Frappe Cloud. So yeah, just some proof that IndiaFOSS actually is running on Frappe Cloud. So yesterday this happened because a large number of people were just downloading the schedule over and over again, so we weren't told beforehand that expect large amount of traffic. The website limits hit, and for some time the site got suspended. So anyway, the way we have decided to go about our platform is saying, instead of just having CLI tools and YML and whatever other things that people like or developers like, let's just stop at that. We said, let's just convert everything into UI, because somehow the visual hierarchy makes everything very intuitive. You don't have to tell people that certain actions are subset of another actions, or certain actions could be applied on only particular objects. So this is a screenshot of the dashboard. So what we do essentially is when people come to us and they say we want to run a particular set of apps, we want to run Frappe framework and ERP Next and some custom application that they have written, we essentially take GitHub repository URL from them, and then we compile a Docker file for them. So basically, this is what the Docker file looks like. The more the apps you add, the larger the file keeps getting. But the rest of the file is fairly templated. There is nothing that changes. And then we compile this Docker file into a Docker image and deploy it in one of our servers as a Docker container. That's it. There is no magical, Kubernetes or Docker Swarm or Nomad or anything that we don't understand is running. We just ship this image to a Docker registry. At this moment, that we are even running our own registry, and then we pull this image on one of our servers, and then we do Docker run, and that is it. So once we deploy this container, essentially you get to see the same sort of hierarchy that you've seen in the first image, which is a bench has some apps and some sites. And at this point, however, the apps are actually frozen in time. We are deploying a particular commit instead of just some random commit at the head of the branch. And then this becomes essential because people want to sometimes have frozen updates. They want to deploy a particular version of the app, but not have their sites updated, or want to deploy in multiple regions or multiple servers. Anyway, so once you get to bench, you can now create your own site on a bench. And then, again, site also gets its own dashboard. And most of the actions that you can do on a site are basically some version of a job. So a job is basically some remote code being executed actually on the server that is running the site. But you get to see the results of the job on Frappe Cloud website. And the way we do it is using something called agent. And it's like a fairly simple application, some 1,000 lines of Flask, and we use SQLite as database backend. No MongoDB, sorry. And we use RQ because we want to do asynchronous processing. So instead of just blocking on request, we accept the job, send out some ID, and then process the job later. So basically, if you want to go and define your own jobs on your site or for your custom app, you have to define these 3 things: an HTTP endpoint for your job, a definition, which is just a Python function definition, and a step definition, which is if your job has to have multiple steps, you can basically define each one of them as a small method. And this is a sample method for backup step. And backup usually takes more than a second to run. So instead of waiting for the job backup to run, we essentially just return a job ID. And then this press application keeps polling for this job to be completed. And once the job is done, we show success or failure in the dashboard. So that is basically how we run jobs, and that is how we do basically every single thing. There are some special cases where we actually need root access on servers. That is done via Ansible. Everything else, however, everything that is maintenance related and stuff that just has to keep happening automatically runs via press and agent. And then if you're familiar with Frappe, everything that is being shown here actually is stored in our single database that is running, single MariaDB database. And we have no issues so far. And this is the view of our doc type, which is basically a database row in the backend. There is no NoSQL planet scale database underlying here, just MariaDB on a single server. Anyway, and this still gets us roughly 1,200 deploys from thousands of customers that we have every month, and roughly 70,000 jobs on all of our infrastructure. So we're fairly certain that a few months ago, when we decided whether we should deploy our own orchestrator or we should go with something that is, Google pushed, I think we made a good choice. And maybe you should make the same choice. Either come try our software or deploy your own. It doesn't take a lot of efforts. So anyway, so if you want to try out Frappe Cloud locally, you can set up your own. Like if you're running Linux, then you can set up something locally with Vagrant. And if you are like mortals, who are running Windows and Mac, then you should deploy on public cloud. There is probably no hope for you. Anyway, so the local setup is simply, you just build a Ubuntu image, and you just do Vagrant up. And there are a few steps that you have to perform to populate the database. And that is it. You'll get your own local cluster running Frappe Cloud. And basically, the same steps will get you a production cluster as well. Skipping the Vagrant up part. So when we kept growing, when we kept adding these features for custom apps, and when we found bigger and bigger customers, they essentially came with this requirement saying, we have to have monitoring and logging and everything. And then now you should deploy Frappe Cloud anywhere. All of this is pre-configured for you. You can define your own, add your own exporters and make your own dashboards, but most of the things that you need are actually pre-configured from day zero. And this is our whole infrastructure. There is nothing hidden, So basically, you can download it, run it, and have your own copy of Frappe Cloud running. There is no secret code. There is no secret configuration at all. It comes with payment integrations for Razorpay and Stripe. And because all of our SaaS flows are also working on Frappe Cloud, that also you get for free. And we have to file GST, and then hopefully, thankfully, we run ERP Next. We build ERP Next, so we have an integration with ERP Next. And then some of the third-party customers are actually asking, if they could publish their app on Frappe Cloud, and so we made the marketplace as well. That also comes with Frappe Cloud for free. So the reason I'm here, actually it might go backwards. The reason we are open sourcing might be the reason I'm here. And before I go further, maybe think twice before listening and taking to heart what I'm going to say. So maybe you should not take philosophical advice from 25-year-olds. Anyway, so why open source? Why here? Why release everything that we have built that gives us some proprietary edge? And then a few months ago, this is the question that came to my mind. When we are writing this software, 2 years ago we had no idea whether this is going to work or not. And 2 years ago we had different philosophies and different priorities. And then we decided to keep some of our software closed, and most of our softwares, GPL, AGPL, or MIT. But however, this cloud is what gets us scale. Cloud is what gets us some marginal monetary gain, and that was the reason. We essentially said this doesn't affect our customers. It doesn't help our customers. It only helps third-party players in the ecosystem. So we should not be open sourcing it, and we should keep all the knowledge that we have gained to ourselves. And I don't think that is right. Everything that we have built so far is on top of public components, public knowledge. Our story, I won't be sitting here. Frappe would not be a 14-year-old company if it weren't for completely open source software. None of the stuff that we do is proprietary. We haven't inherited $1 billion from someone. So it is only fair that the outcome of everything that we do should also be public. And then at no point in time have I looked at a piece of software that is useful and thought, hey, it would have been super cool if this is closed for some reason and I have to pay and I can't see and I can't use and I can't redistribute. Never happens. And I hope it doesn't happen with you as well. So categorically, open source software is better than proprietary alternatives. And then, so this is my dilemma over the past 3 months, which is now that I can do this, being in Frappe, our engineers have full autonomy over the work that they do. And not just our engineers, actually. Everyone in Frappe has autonomy over the work that they do. And they get to choose their work. They get to choose the outcome of their work. And so the decision comes to me, saying whether I should keep it public, I should keep it private, I should not think about it ever. And then, if I am able to do the right thing, I must do it. So that is why open source. And it's not easy. It wasn't easy. Not just convincing myself, but convincing the rest of the company. Because this makes whole Frappe technology is 100% open source. After we do this, there is no proprietary code inside our company. Actually, there's no functioning proprietary code inside our company, and there is no open core. There are no open core components. Basically, you can go today on our GitHub profile and replicate Frappe technologies as is, minus the engineers. So it wasn't difficult. It wasn't easy for me to convince anyone. And then, in our heart, everyone wants to give away the work that we have produced and said, here, something for free. But the question that everyone kept asking, what about revenue? What about losing competitive edge? And the question people were really asking was basically, what about money? That is the only question. There is no other moral question about, making your software open source. If it helps or doesn't help your customers, it's not your problem. It shouldn't be your question that you're asking. The only question people usually ask is, I will not make enough money. And that is the right, that might be true, might not be true. But that is not a good way of thinking about these things. You should be making principled decisions whenever possible. And then for me, the principle is simple, the software has to be open source, because that is how I would like the whole world to be. I would not want anyone to pick and choose their license. It is fine, it is there in everyone's right to pick and choose the license for the software, but that's not how I would want it to be. So anyway, the whole point of this talk was really, maybe use our software, but set your software free. And maybe ask yourself, what is stopping you from doing this to your software? And if your company for some reason doesn't allow it, like I know at least one company that doesn't have such a rule. Anyway, so come and join us. And that makes Frappe Cloud AGPL 3.0. They're just two repositories, go for clone, star, tweet at us, whatever you want. And then maybe try running locally. Anyway, so there is still some work in progress. That is, other than this incremental improvement that we do. And so we are moving towards containerizing everything. So right now we run databases on bare metal. We just do apt install MariaDB, Nginx server. Like most of our components other than bench are not containerized. So we are moving towards containerizing everything in the hope that we'll get more flexibility. So we can choose, swap components easily. And then half of my talk was about actually telling you what bench is and what Frappe is. So we want to remove this restriction out of Frappe Cloud and say, hey, like if you can just tell me a Docker file, or if you can just tell me an image, I'll deploy it for you. So going forward, you can just plug in any image that you have a Docker file for, or a link to a registry for. You can deploy in Frappe Cloud, and you get everything else for free. And the current dashboard essentially tries to hide a lot of powerful features from our customers, because over 2 years we learned a lot, and then the more and more we looked at our customers, the more and more we saw ourselves in them, the more and more our customers want control. So we're working with Timeless. Maybe you should go and work with them as well, trying to give more control to our users and remove as much magical components out of the UI and make everything visible. So that ends my presentation. If you have any questions, you can answer.